Hello, my name is Annette Tarpley. This is Pop Chat, and today our guest is Richard Lamoureux from British Columbia. So, welcome, Richard. It's good to have you.
Hello, Annette. Nice to see you.
You too. We had some technical difficulties, so we were a little late, but it's always the case, it seems like. Um, Anybody who is joining us is probably too early to be saying this, but um, you need to identify yourself if you're going to make comments by just putting your name at the end of it if you haven't changed your settings to identify you. So Richard, I do have your bio, but I think it's more interesting for you probably to tell me about it than for me to read it. I think it'll probably uh, give me a little bit about your background and whatever you want to give as far as personal or education or career, and then your writing career, your poetry.
Okay. Well, I started actually writing in grade six. So I guess being that I'm old, that means I've been writing for a very long time. Um, how I got into poetry is I had failed a couple of grades when I was in school. I failed grade three and I failed grade six. But I had a teacher who took a real interest in me the second time I was in grade six. And he says, you're a smart kid. And he says, I don't understand why you're not doing well. So I'm going to let you just kind of go at your own pace. And one of the first things that I had any kind of academic success at was reciting the poem The Destruction of Sennacherib by Lord Byron. And for me, who never was much of a reader, to have to go in front of my class and recite this poem from memory was kind of my first introduction to poetry. And then I started writing, and I've been writing ever since. I didn't have the opportunity for higher education because I left home when I was quite young. I was 17, so I just basically got uh, my high school diploma. But I've
Uh-huh.
been really fortunate to have a really interesting career in communications, in banking, working in human resources, and also in the luxury automotive market. So at the time that I grew up, you could still succeed if you took advantage of courses and programs that companies were offering for training. So although I don't have a formal education, I've participated in a lot of education over the years. Um, I love poetry. One of the first introductions that I had to poetry on the internet or Facebook was actually through your site, Annette. And then you invited me and were quite persuasive to get me to become an administrator. So I
Yeah.
had a lot of fun with that. And then I started my own group called the Inspired Poetry Project. Um, the type of poetry that I write is I think I tend to be fairly empathetic. I try to put myself into other people's shoes and be creative that way. So I write on quite a large variety of topics, and you can probably attest to that because you've written or you've read a number of my pieces.
Yeah. And you do you address about anything. Really, you're kind of like me in that you'll talk about anything if it comes to your mind. So, how would you describe your style of writing?
Um, well, again, I would say I tend to be empathetic. So I feel like in a way that through my poetry that I've been able to kind of live almost many lives by putting myself in other people's situations. And,
Mhm.
I have this imagination that there's this stream, and then somehow those of us who are creative, we kind of tap into that stream. So the times when I feel my work is most resonating are those times when I don't even really think about it. It's just like the piece kind of flows out of me, and next thing you know, I've got a poem in front of me. And it's kind of surreal in a way to look back at some of the stuff that I've written over the years, and it almost feels like somebody else has written it.
Wow. So you have at least one book out. Do you have more than one book out?
I had two books, but the one book didn't really go anywhere, and I
Yes,
probably
but
have,
your one book did.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been around the world, and it's in second print. I've contemplated on having it printed again, but I think I'll put my efforts into the next one. But I've certainly got a lot of material to work with.
Yeah, because I know you sold like a lot of copies, and so I guess those of us who have published, what is your marketing secret? How is it that you got that book out there, or that so many people just kind of, you know, and, adopted it into their library? What did you do anything special, or is it just that you're so well known amongst these people that they purchased it?
Yeah, I think what's happened is that when I've had people who've read it, it's kind of resonated with them because I deal with a lot of human topics. So I talk about a lot of, I deal with the education system, I deal with aging, I deal with relationships, both positive and negative. I talk about my relationship with God and how that kind of fits into the equation. So when people have read it, they've related to it, and a lot of times I get contact and say, "Hey, can you get me more copies?" In fact, I even had a number of copies go into the prison system as a way to connect with prisoners and some of their trauma background.
Wow, that's marvelous. It's good for you to get that out there like that. We have some viewers here. Let me just pop these up. We have, do you know Vince? This is Vince Valdez. He's from Canada.
Hi, Vince.
Hi, Vince. And then another Facebook user said, "Wow, that's awesome. Please, if you are making comments, please sign um, your comments so we know who you are." Greg Etzel is here, the ever faithful Greg. So, hi, Greg. I'm not sure who this is. Um, we have Sai Prakash, one of our admins for POP. Hi, Sai. And Stuart Dan is here. Hi, Stuart. Good to have you too. So, so I think you know that you have a poem. I'm getting very excited because we're going to be publishing I think it's coming out in December, finally, the Pop Anthology. And you have one of my favorite poems ever that's going to be published in it, that you're allowing me to publish in that. So I can't wait for that. And it's Cup of Empty. And we have a video on that, but I'm just kind of curious about that right, and how that came about, because it's very moving. I recited it one time when I was on an event, and got all choked up, and it's just very moving. So I want to try to get inside your head a little bit to figure out how you came up with that piece. I mean, to me, it's a masterpiece. I just love it.
Oh, thank you. With that particular one, it's semi-autobiographical in a sense because I grew up in a very abusive home, and my dad was there was substance abuse issues. So not only was it alcohol, but there was drugs, and there was physical abuse. It's one of the reasons I left home so early. So I kind of channeled some of those emotions into that piece. The difference, of course, is that none of myself or my siblings ended up passing away. But I think that when I wrote the story, for some reason, that's part of that story kind of came to fruition.
Yeah.
And anyway, I guess I understand you have a video of it, so
I
I'll kind of let
do.
it
We'll
speak.
watch it, and then we can kind of, discuss it again. But it's a great video.
Yeah.
Alan Johnson from the UK put this together, and we will take a look at it.
Yeah, Alan Johnson. He's done a number of videos of my pieces. So, and I know he's done a number of yours as well. Very
Yeah,
talented guy.
yeah,
If you do go to YouTube, please, type in either my name or Annette's name, and you'll be able to watch some of those videos. He really is a magical person in the way he does these. So I'm really thankful that that piece was brought to life through him.
yeah, yeah. He's a master at what he does. So I mean, nobody does it like Alan. I mean, who do you know that does the whole production and everything himself? So
Yeah, he
we're gonna
even
watch.
writes the
I'm
music,
sorry.
he even composes the music,
I
which is pretty
know.
cool.
I know. It's marvelous. He just did one for me recently. Actually, it just came out yesterday, and it was. I have a friend whose daughter is an ice dancer, with another guy, and so I always loved ice dancing, and so I wrote this little poem and then gave it to him, and he just finished the video yesterday. So
Oh, very cool.
yeah, so we're gonna go to Cup of Empty. Give me just a second here, and
She pours him a cup of empty from a teapot of childhood dreams. He loves the sound of her giggles. Hers is the light of 1,000 moonbeams. Moonbeams and butterflies, petals from roses, counting out loud, crossing fingers and toesies. Unicorn and Teddy, both enjoying a sip, cups full of empty, never spill and can't drip. He lifts a cup of empty and gives his baby a wink. This is so delicious. It's the very best I've ever had to drink. In the evening, he turns to his bottle. With his friends, he goes to the bar. So she faithfully waits for hours, thinking, "Dear Daddy, I wonder where you are." Moonbeams and butterflies, petals from roses, counting out loud, crossing fingers and toesies. Unicorn and Teddy, both enjoying a sip, cups full of empty, never spill and can't drip. She sets their table and faithfully waits, hopes that tonight Daddy won't be so late, but tired give way to sleepy as Unicorn sings a tune. Meanwhile Teddy sits watchfully under the moon. Daddy comes home after midnight, sees his angel asleep on the floor, smiles and sips a sip of empty and thinks, "I shouldn't drink anymore." Years have a way of taking. She doesn't wait for Daddy at home. She's found a new kind of pleasure. Her hunger grew from being alone. She fills her veins with her empty, has dreams she can't explain, trades her body and those giggles in hopes of escaping her pain. Moonbeams and butterflies, petals from roses, counting out loud, crossing fingers and toesies. Unicorn and Teddy, both enjoying a sip, cups full of empty, never spill, and can't drip. Daddy sat home and he waited. His baby girl, she never came home. He still drowns himself in his bottle, but now he drinks all alone. Her teacup sits on the counter, emptied of her childhood dreams. He misses the sound of her giggles and the soft light of 1,000 moonbeams. He lifts the cup full of empty to his lips and takes another drink, empties out the rest of the bottle as his pain is poured down the sink. Moonbeams and butterflies, petals and roses, counting out loud, crossing fingers and toesies. Unicorn and Teddy, both enjoying a sip, cups full of empty, never spill and can't drip. He traded what was real for his empty as she relinquished her childhood dreams. Now his baby girl has flown to heaven on the light of 1,000 moonbeams. He wishes he could be with his baby, lift her cup and give her a wink and say, this is so delicious. It's the best I've ever had to drink.
Just so powerful. It's just this masterpiece that you created, and I love I think that what makes it so unique and really great is that repetitiveness that you put in the moonbeams and butterflies, petals from roses, counting out loud, the crossing finger and toesies, unicorns and teddy all enjoying a sip, cups full of empty, never spill, can't drip. That's just, I think that really makes it so powerful. And it's one of my favorite poems ever, really.
Oh, thank you.
So, yeah.
Um, I know it was a very difficult topic to deal with, and I wanted to have a sense of whimsy with it as well. And,
Mm.
I think that part of it really kind of anchored it.
Yeah, yeah, it really did. It was, yeah, it's just such a great poem. Can't tell you how happy I am that you're going to allow me to publish in the first pop anthology. So I think what that you know, I think both you and I kind of share that commonality, and that we both grew up with alcoholism and
Hmm.
witnessed or were subject to abuse and so forth. So and both of us ended up different. We didn't go down that road, or at least
Yeah, thank God. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think I decided at a very young age, I knew I wasn't going to go down that road. So I think when you kind of go one way or another, with it, and but I think we're better people, stronger people because of that we went through it. We have some other comments here from uh, oh, Stuart Dan also said it's one of his favorites, and we
Thank you.
have yeah, we have Reshma Sabrina Sopath from South Africa. Welcome. And then we have Mela from Sri Lanka. So welcome. And someone said just beautiful. That's Stu. An outstanding poem. Very sad. It is. Wow, really a masterpiece, but a very sad poem. It is. It is, but it's unfortunately it's reality. There's real cases like that. Done well, nice masterpiece, and yep, talking about abuse too. So I think that you have a way with a lot of your writing in bringing light to subject matters that some people don't even try to broach. You just kind of delve into it. I think that if you it's my perception that if you think it's important and needs a voice, you give it voice.
Hmm.
And is that what you tend to do?
Yeah, I feel like I have to write something when it gets into my head. And, you know, and I'm thankful that, I haven't really had anything that hasn't been received well. I hope I deal with the subject matter in a way that's sensitive and caring and, and not being judgmental. So, it's really, because even the person who's the alcoholic, they have their demons. I know with my dad, I had a really hard time at first to forgive him, but then in forgiving him, I was able to kind of see him and understand him in a different way. So
Yeah.
everybody has a story, everybody has a reason for what happens and how they behave, and sometimes compassion and connection is the way that they can get through that themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and you say that you were able to forgive your dad. I remember that I don't think I ever really like said anything to my mother about you're a horrible parent or you could have been better or this or that. I knew that she was a product of her own upbringing. Her mother was alcoholic, and so she did the best that she could, and And about a month ago, one of my children, I said, "Well, you never spend enough time with me and the kids, the grandkids, and yada yada." And so I wrote my children a very long letter and emailed it to them. And in there is very important for me to say, this is life, and this is parenting, and I think in order to understand your parent, you need to know where they came from, where their parents came from, gave the history, and then said to them, so it's important. It was important for me as a parent to let you know that you were loved, to
Mhm.
encourage you, to build you up, you know. So you as a parent need need to be whatever parent you thought I was not.
Mhm.
So if you felt like I made mistakes, then you need to be that parent you thought I should have been. So it's the hardest job ever. My
Yeah,
my big thing was I worked so much. I was gone
yeah.
a lot. Yeah,
But you do what you have to do to take care of your family in the best way that you know how. And I mean,
yeah,
all of us as parents, we have our regrets. I know for me during my career, there were times when I was working like 6 days a week and 12 hours a day. I mean,
yeah,
it was just part of life.
yeah,
But I hope despite that, that my son Matthew knows how much he's loved.
yeah. So one of the things that, and this kind of resonates with what I always say too, is that parenting and being a dad never came with a handbook. And I always say that too. There's no handbook. Every child's different. Every stage is different. What works for one doesn't work for the other. Yeah, and it really doesn't. Sometimes I do feel like we need a license to parent. There's probably people out there that do. But so tell me a little bit about. Actually, let me know what your favorite poem is. That's my favorite of yours, but what is your favorite one?
It's kind of like when you have children or family members. It's really hard to pick a favorite. I think what it is that the one that you're working at the time is your favorite in that moment because you're putting all of yourself into it. So certainly Cup of Empty is one that definitely resonates with me. I did another one called the Canvas. Big Girls Do Cry. I think that's another one that I've written that I'm quite fond of. Uh, Wobbly Wheel is another one about homeless population. Um, I wrote another piece about Africa that is going to be in another book that's coming out shortly. So yeah, I really have a hard time to choose. I've probably written over 5,000 pieces.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So
I
do
didn't
you write?
realize.
Do you write every day?
Pretty much. Sometimes I'll write two or three in a day, but I hope that even though I'm writing a large volume of pieces, I hope uh, that they're still good.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think you can agree that when we write, um, some of them are better than the others, and we know it.
yeah.
You write when you think, oh, this one's really got something. But so other than writing, what are your other interests?
My other interests, obviously, I enjoy spending time with my family. Now I'm getting the privilege of spending time with our grandson as well. So once a week, I take care of him. It's kind of helps our son and his wife, Harleen, um, you know, kind of de-stress from being parents. Um, so that's a real privilege. I'm quite passionate about playing pickleball, and I also coach pickleball. So I do that probably 3 or 4 times a week. We love the water in the summertime. We live by Lake Okanagan here in the interior of BC, and I wish we could travel more. The last few years have not been great with COVID and all, but we're really
Mm.
fortunate to live in a place that's almost like being on vacation most of the time. So, um,
Yeah, I wish you could. Well, you're on your phone. I wish people could see your view from
yeah,
your living
it's
room.
still dark here.
Oh, it's so it's let's see, you're 3 hours behind me. So you're
Yeah,
7:30. So it's
yeah,
still dark at 7:30.
Yeah, because we have mountains, so it's mountains and lake, and so with the mountains, your day starts a little bit later
Uh,
and ends a little sooner. Yeah.
yeah, well, it's you have a
Oh,
beautiful
thank you.
view, and and I think one of the other things that I admire is that you have a lovely wife who you have showered with accolades before, and I highly admire that when someone has a good marriage and has found that other person that really kind of completes them. So where did you meet your wife?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I'm from Ontario, which is about 4,000 kilometers away from where I live here in British Columbia. And a buddy of mine and myself, we went down to Mexico to a place called Club Maeva, which was like an all-inclusive resort. And I met my wife by a swimming pool,
Oh,
not too
okay.
far from the ocean. So
Oh, wow.
literally, she ruined my vacation because I arrived at a different time than she did. So I was there 3 days after she arrived. So we spent, oh no, actually 4 days after she arrived. So we spent 3 days together, and in 3 days, I knew she was the one. I went back to Ontario. I quit my job. I sold everything, and I moved out west. And that's been
Wow.
29 years ago. So she's the best decision I ever made.
So yeah, so for in just 3 days you knew, and after
Yeah,
that you just packed up and left.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we went back and forth on the phone. We literally, in those days, you didn't have all the long distance plans. So
right.
between the two of us, we spent over $10,000 on telephone calls. I mean, I could have
Wow.
flown back and forth several times, but I was
So you
working at the
had to
time.
get married. You
Oh, I
had to
couldn't
get
afford not to.
married.
So I went out west to visit her. I met her family. Then she came out to Ontario to meet my family. I loaded up what I had left in a U-Haul on the back of my Nissan 240, and we drove across the country, and we've been together ever since.
Oh, that's cool. Why don't you share with us one of your poems?
Sure. So I figured, being that this is Halloween, I'll do something that's a little bit darker.
Okay.
So, but darker with a I think I've lost you. Are you still there?
No, I'm trying to switch over to just you, and I'm messing it up.
Oh, no
So,
worries.
see, look it's been a while since I've done this, and I have this other thing here. So I'm trying to get over to you. Hold on just a second. Bear with
Okay.
me. There, and then let's see. Oh, I remember how to do it. Look at what happens a week without doing it. There you
There
go.
we go. Okay, so I call this one channeling my dark Seuss, and I called the piece "I'm Youer Than You." I studied real hard the you-ness of you. I paid close attention to the things that you do. No detail too small. I even learned how you chew. I eat what you eat. I love camel stew. I walk your walk. I have your unique style. I've walked in your shoes for many a mile. Look at my face, the twinkle in my eye. I have your mischievous look, and I own your smile. But now, my dear friends, my dear friend, you are deader than dead. I'm with your lovely bride, and I'm sleeping in your bed. She thinks I am you because I say what you said. You're at the bottom of a lake, weighted down by my lead. As time goes by, I'll become meer than me, because in the end, that's who I want to be. I hope she'll still love me. In time, I will see. Being youer than you has helped set me free. I love my new life. It's better, you see. There are so many benefits to my insanity.
That was great. I love that. You have. I'm gonna. There you go. I wish my mouse is not quite it's acting up this morning. It's not moving around like it should. So, is there anything that you have on your bucket list that you would like to do? Like maybe 3 things that you can think of that you'd like to do?
Um, I always wanted to actually take one of the Toastmaster courses, because for me, I feel I'm much better at the writing than I am at the presenting part. So I think that would kind of hone my skills and, definitely help with public presentations. Ironically, through my work, I've always done lots of presentations, but I think when it comes to public speaking, especially when it's stuff that's very personal to you, I think it's much harder than say a work environment when you're doing training or support, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of my bucket lists. The other one is when my wife retires in a year and a half, we want to take an extended trip to Europe. We're very fond of the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and we want to spend a little bit more time there.
Uh,
Lots of places I'd like to go, like the East Coast. I've never been to, like Newfoundland and that part of our country. I think that would be kind of cool. And I'd like to obviously publish some more books. I just have to find the time to actually do it.
yeah. Yeah, it takes a lot of time to do all that. You mentioned the Toastmasters things, which I tried to get signed up for one recently, and it just never worked. I tried a couple times. So, they count all your uhs and all your pauses, and they critique you, which is good. But I had very briefly had a like a voiceover coach that I was talking about the uhs, and he says, "Oh, it's just part of conversation. Uhs are okay." And I felt rather vindicated after that for the uhs. But so, is there anything that you think is taboo in your writing? That any type of subject matter, something that you would not write about, or at least not something that you would publicly share?
I don't really think of anything as being off limits, as long as, again, you have to kind of take it. You have to present information with a certain degree of sensitivity. Um, what I try to do with the writing is to try to make people see things from a different perspective. I even actually wrote one piece from a Nazi. I called it The Tolerant Man, and I wrote it from a Nazi's perspective. And I mean, that may sound like kind of an unusual thing, but then I had also wrote a piece called Tolerance, was talking about how, um, people don't want to be tolerated. They want to be accepted and loved and included. So that when I've done some public presentations, I do both of those pieces together, and they're kind of a contrast in thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to read that later. Send it to me.
Yeah, I'll have to find
Now
it.
I'm just curious, to see what that kind of perspective would be, that, how you try to get in someone's head. So if you could, let me ask you this question. Do you feel like people who write very well, do you think it's a learned thing, or do you think it's more innate?
Well, I think that all of us have a creativity, and I think a lot of people don't tend to tap into it. And it's almost like when we get past a certain age, then we can't be childlike. And I think to be a writer, you do have to become childlike, because you have to have that childlike wonder and to be able to access your imagination. So I think it can be like a muscle. I think it's already innately in every human being. Myself being a Christian or a believer, uh, if we are created in God's image, there isn't any being that's more creative than God.
Yeah.
So for me, when I access my creativity, I feel like I'm accessing part of God. Uh, so that connectedness is really important. But certainly, like any skill, the more that you do something, the more you hone it, and you become more articulate. And then
Right.
also with learning different forms of poetry, I kind of equate it to, if you're an artist and you just have a pencil, you can do a lot with a pencil.
Right.
But then if you have some paintbrushes and you have some charcoal and you have whatever other tools that come to at your disposal, allow you to articulate that vision
Yeah.
more clearly. So by learning other styles and forms, you will tend to gravitate to something that is more to your personality. But until you understand those structures and those ideas, you can't express yourself as clearly.
Right, right. So, is there any kind of advice that you have for people who are starting to write or just getting into it
Yeah,
as
I
far
think
as
don't be afraid, because like put your stuff out there, even if you're going to get some. I mean, not everybody is going to always show you love for it, but the more you do it, the more confidence you're going to have. Try to write every day. If you're A lot of people write journals, and they don't realize that they actually have access to a lot of really good information if you're writing a journal. Because
mm,
if you can go back and then access some of the emotions and the things that you're feeling in any particular moment, I mean, that's gold for writing.
yeah.
So I just say, in the famous words of Nike, just do it.
That's good sound advice. Good sound advice. So, does anyone else in your family write?
Well, interestingly enough, my abusive dad was a writer. He published a book,
Oh, wow.
and in fact, in my book, when you read through it, I did do a section where I put his poetry,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think he could have actually, if he had put more effort into it. And throughout his life, he never did anything with any degree of consistency. But if he had, he would have actually been a very good writer.
Wow. So, is there anybody in your family now who is supportive of you in your writing?
Oh yeah, no, my sweetie obviously is probably one of my biggest supporters. Um, I have um, I have a brother who um, is uncomfortable with poetry, and I think the reason for that is because of my dad. And so so he won't read my stuff because it kind of makes him think of my dad, which, so I empathize with that. So
Yeah,
my sister's also great. She'll often send me words of encouragement, so that's nice.
that's good. So, what makes you smile?
I mean, there's so many things that make me smile. I think mostly, uh, I think having a sense of humor is really important, and I find so many situations to be very humorous, and I find human beings in general uh, give me lots of reasons to smile every day, and I appreciate other people who are good humored. The thing with me is, I guess, because I'm an introvert by nature, I sometimes appear to be much more serious than I actually am, and but anybody who kind of gets to know me will start to pick up on my sense of humor. My
Yeah,
wife, at first, uh, she wasn't quite sure how to take me, but she's picked up on my humor, and my son certainly has.
so are you rather dry at times?
Yes, because I like to play with words, so I kind of
Yeah,
take take something that would be like a normal saying, and then I kind of play around with the words, and then come up with a thought on it.
that's great. That's great. So what do you think that we can do as a community in the poetry community to continue to really kind of unite and to encourage each other? And guess I would like to know what we can do to encourage each other, as well as what you also think of like negative criticism.
Yeah, so I think that unless somebody's actually inviting you to give them a critique on their work, that you should never do it in a public forum. Because when people are writing, they're putting bits of themselves out there. So it's very important to be protective of their spirit. So if you do want to share something with them, send it in Messenger. Do it in a very gentle way. Ask them if they would be open to suggestions. If they're not inviting it, you've got to really tread carefully.
Yeah,
Uh, the one thing I would say that I would like to see more of on all of the forums is, it's great when people will leave a like, but take a few moments and show some love. Just leave a few words. You'd be surprised at how much that would encourage poets to kind of blossom. And one good comment can really make a poet's day. When we're writing, it's not if it's not a two way street, it kind of really it's not the same experience. So
Yeah.
as writers, we need readers, and the two of them are really inseparable. So I would
Yeah.
encourage anybody who loves poetry, be sure to, if you're going to read something, for the time that it takes to read it and then to leave a comment, you'll definitely make somebody's day.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think it's important for all of us. I'm guilty of it. In our busy world, I think sometimes we think we're just too busy, but we do need to take out that couple minutes to really respond to people. I think you're right. So, do you feel like poetry has gained the attention and notoriety that it should um, in your country, in other countries? How do you feel that our world really treats it? Do you feel like it still really embraces it? Do you think it's more no longer in vogue? How do you feel about it?
I think poetry kind of throughout history has kind of had its ebbs and flows. And I think what's going to happen is, especially as our world, we're looking at eventually having shorter work weeks. You've got automation. There's lot of there's going to be a lot more leisure time at some point. So I think that the arts, whether it be poetry or painting or music, there's going to be a renaissance. And those of us who are involved in it now are really at the cusp of, I think, of a real artistic renaissance. So I think poetry is here to stay. Um, I know, like, when I read your poetry, I think you're like me in the sense that I think our work is very relatable. It's not, we're not trying to um, impress people with big words and obscure metaphor. I think it's very understandable, and I
Right.
think for poetry to have a wider appeal, that should be part of the goal of it. Because there's some
Yeah.
poetry that can be read by poets who can appreciate more of the nuances, and then there's poetry that's kind of to appeal to a wider audience. And I know for myself, I tend to want to appeal to a wider audience.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I think that is really important. Actually, a really important aspect. You use the terminology Renaissance, which I like a lot. I've been using revival. I was like, we need a revival, and kind of a poetry revival because I feel like it is there. But I think that you're right that it is. There's a trend now again. So I'm hoping, and especially with social media, I think it can help promote it and really bring it to light again. So maybe people can get back into writing. And there's certainly, wouldn't you agree, certain countries that are better at promoting that than other countries as far as poetry is concerned and literature. Do you feel that way?
So it kind of cut out there for a second. Can you just repeat
I'm
that?
sorry. Do you feel that there's certain countries that promote poetry and literature more than others?
Um, I guess because I haven't spent enough time in those countries, I wouldn't really have a clear idea.
Right.
I think because I'm only, for the most part, exposed to North American because of English, and I guess English being an international language, there's a lot of poetry that's written in our language, but I think we miss out on the beautiful poetry that is in other languages because it doesn't always translate. Um, Mind you, I have one friend, Yanni, and I think you know Yanni as well.
Yeah.
And uh, she's an Asian lady, and she's got really cool ways of expressing herself, and her stuff really translates well into English because it's very playful.
And she's from where again?
Um, my brain just went on hold, but she's
Not
anyway.
from.
Yeah, I'll
That's
send.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
no issue. Do you find that in general that in the poetry community we're very supportive of each other? Do
Yeah.
you find that there's a camaraderie or and through this general interest that we share?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've made some great friends online, and I consider it a privilege to be able to read their work and to comment, and a lot of times we play off of each other. So I think we can be inspiration to each other. So there's, I know for myself, I've done a lot of pieces where I've written with other poets, and
Mm,
that's just another experience that's really fun.
yeah, the collaborations.
Yeah.
You spoke earlier, I think, about using metaphors and things like that. And I think some people, the complexity of it, or they'll speak a little bit more in riddles. Um, so I think you can do it where it's very obscure and like nobody's going to know what you're talking about. And other people I can think can utilize it when you agree with being able to make it understandable and relatable. I think, like you said earlier, but I think that there's a little bit of an art form into doing that, don't you think?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can be you can be artistic, and you want to always have a bit of shadow in your work, because, like, just an example, if you were to look at a beautiful photograph where there's sunshine and everything is just like perfection, and you
Mhm.
can look at that and you think, wow, that's really pretty. But if you see another painting and you have a little bit of fog and some darkness and shadows, I mean, you'll go back to that picture several times because you're kind of wondering what's in the fog, what's behind that mist. So it gets your imagination going. So I
Yeah,
think when it comes to writing your poetry, have a little bit of mystery that is, something hidden in the shadows that kind of grabs people's interest. It'll allow them to go back and see it, because depending on what their mood is, they'll go back and they'll look at that piece and they'll get a completely different experience from it.
yeah, it's true, it's true. Why don't you share another one of your poems with us?
Sure. Let's see what we've got here. Um, okay, so this one here is a little bit playful, and I called it "Truth Be Told." She lies on the bed. She lies on the couch. She lies with anyone who listens. The girl, she never tells the truth. She's such a pretty little liar with those big baby blues. He wants to believe her. I think he needs to. He asks, who's that on the phone? Where are you going? She answers with a smile. Sheila and me, we're going to have a girls' night out. She flips her gorgeous blonde hair as she leaves the room. She says, I have to get ready, baby. Don't wait up. I'll stay with her tonight. He always waits. He obsesses. Still, he can't admit, so he puts up with it. He tells her she's beautiful. It never seems to slow her down. She's accustomed to compliments, men or women, young and old. They're always telling her she's gorgeous. Of course, it's true. If you see her, you'll think it too. So out the door, him hearing high heels click on the floor, catching a whiff of perfume. She knows how to exit a room. Into her pink Mercedes, short skirt va-va-voom. Off she drives, vroom, vroom, vroom. Him, he lies on the bed. He wishes he was lying with her. Instead, he's lying to himself. It's way too hard to admit the truth. When she comes home, he'll bathe in her radiance. After all, she's his pretty little liar. And they both lie, and they both will lie on opposite sides of the bed. She says, sorry, baby, I'm tired. I didn't sleep much last night. He thinks, just maybe, that last bit, she's telling the truth.
That's an interesting poem, and you're talking about lying. So do you think everyone lies?
I could say that no, they don't, but then I would be lying.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think that we all do to a certain extent. whether it's to protect somebody, hey, how do you like my hair? It doesn't look so good,
Yeah.
you don't say that. So yeah, I think to a certain extent we all kind of stretch the truth a little bit. But I like your response. Other than that, I would be lying. So how would you define poetry? What is your definition?
Um, I don't know if I can really define it, because I think poetry is really different for different people. And there's some people who say, "Oh, I hate poetry," and then there's other people that are really passionate about it, and then there's those in the middle that, if something kind of catches their ear and it resonates with them, then that is poetry to them. And some pieces we might look at and think, well, that's not poetry. uh, but to somebody else, they would think, wow, that's really beautiful. So
Yeah.
it's really indefinable.
I think too, when people tell me that, because a lot of people have told me that, oh, they don't like poetry. And then you ask them about music and songs, and of course, oh yeah, I like songs. Well,
Yeah,
songs are poetry and music, right?
exactly.
So yeah, it's very poetic. So there's another question I wanted to ask you, and it left my screen. So do you ever write anything beyond poetry? Do you do short stories? Have you done other writings?
Oh yeah, no, I've done quite a number of short stories, and I kind of find that fun. I just wrote a piece called, I think it's called "The Shadow Man." That
Mhm.
it's actually on your site. You can have a look at it. It's kind of a combination of a short story and poetry.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Are you published in other anthologies and so forth?
I have, off the top, if I had to list them, I'm going to be in your upcoming one, so that's
Yeah.
kind of cool. Yeah, so over the years, I've been invited to participate in a number of publications. So
Right, right. Well, our time has come to an end, unfortunately, but it's been such a pleasure to have you. I'm a big Richard fan, and your cup of empty will always really resonate with me. So I love that poem. But I really thank you for agreeing to come on, and thank you for all of your works that you give to the poetry community.
oh, thank you. And I really appreciate that you invited me, and I thank you for making it comfortable and conversational. It's like we're sitting in our living rooms just having a chat. So thank you to you, and also thanks to the folks that signed in and listened to the interview. So have a great day, and oh, and congratulations! Was it 28,000 people now for pop?
29.
Oh
The
wow,
next the next
that's
one will
incredible.
be the
Yeah.
next one will be 30. It'll probably be another month. It'll be 30. So yeah, it's crazy. So
Yeah.
yes, thank you all pop members, and of course the admin team is wonderful, and you've always been supportive. Even though you're no longer administrator, you're still there. So, in a big way. So I really appreciate it, and sharing. And now you can compete in the contest. So that's great.
Yeah, so that's fun. I've
Um,
gotten a few certificates, so that's good.
yeah. Well, thank you again, and I'll be seeing you around. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Take care, Richard.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.